Look, y'all, I know that I don't necessarily have to read between the lines so much to try to figure out who wins this show, but to me, it's just a little bit more fun that way. And the way that this edit has been going this season, I feel like it could still be damn near anybody's game, which I love. I'm super excited to dive into episode 10 with y'all, but first, before we get started, please make sure you hit that subscribe button below if you have not already. We still have a few episodes to go this season. After all, we're getting a 2-part finale, so really there's 4 more episodes left, and we always have a good time over here discussing and dissecting the show and talking about things that aren't too obvious. So if you would like to continue to have a deep dive into Survivor and other competition reality shows like it, this is the channel for you. Now, let's get started. Once again, we open up this episode with Teeny's perspective, and this time she's pissed about the Saul vote. We get a little bit more insight as to what went down during the last tribal council, including the word spreading around to everybody that Genevieve was really the mastermind behind everything. Now, Genevieve is still out there swearing that voting out Saul was the right move for her to make, but I just don't know about all that because it didn't really look like she was on anybody's radar at first, but now she definitely is. For one, Teeny's pissed at her. I mean, that trust seems to be pretty much shattered over there. And also, we find out later that Rachel wants Genevieve out too. And even if Genevieve does make it all the way to the end, the way things are going, it might be kind of difficult for her to be able to get the votes in the first place. So fingers crossed for her. We're just going to have to see where her game goes here, because to me, it seems like she might be getting set up for a little bit of a downfall. Meanwhile, we get this other segment of Andy out there seemingly trying to play everybody. It looks like he's trying to grab allies from all over the place, and he's out there talking his shit too. He's talking a tough game and talking about how he's lethal.
I'm a smiling assassin. Like, I feel like I have ice in my veins, but you know, people don't see that. People see the charming Andy. All I gotta do is crawl over here and decide, you know, who my next victim is. Bite their head off and crawl over here and decide who my next victim is after that. I'm a lethal player in this game.
Now, mind you, he does get that dopey circus music in the background while he's doing all of this, so I'm taking all this with a grain of salt.
So the way that I'm playing this game, I'm looking for opportunities to build bonds on all different sides of the fence. And my next move, I want to go across the aisle and build a really good relationship with someone on Tuku.
I know a lot of y'all are loving this Andy resurrection, and there's a lot of Andy truthers out there that really think he's gonna win, but I'm still just a little hesitant to make that call just because we haven't heard anybody else out there give him that respect or even acknowledge him as a threat or anything. Like, yeah, sure, we hear Andy talk about how great Andy's doing in the game, but in their confessionals, nobody else is really giving him his due like we hear them doing with people like Gabe or Genevieve. So that's why I'm still not completely confident with Andy winning. We also get this equally unhinged edit of Sue just completely shit-talking Kyle still.
He does the poor me, the woe is me. How many times do we have to hear that he's poor?
I'm a good guy, I'm a dad, I'm a this.
He's so hypocritical. None. The sooner Kyle's cut, the happier I'll be. I will give him back his name on a parchment. He wrote my name down.
Exactly.
He didn't feel bad.
Like, I can't even look at Kyle. I hate him.
Because he wrote my name down. He wrote my name down. He wrote my name down.
I gotta admit, y'all, I kind of like this scene because I am a big fan of haters, okay? Hear me out. I just think, I don't know, there's just something a little bit funny and petty about somebody just like truly hating somebody for no real reason. It's not like it's the bigoted, I hate you for who you are type of hate. It's just like the petty, fun Survivor type of hate. Who doesn't love that? So I think Sue is a lot of fun here, but honestly, because of all this and some other things we've seen for her, I just don't see it for her to win this game, unfortunately. Her edit has just been pretty inconsistent most of the season, and her entire persona seems to revolve around hating one person these days, which isn't the best look. But hey, it's still pretty entertaining, right? So go off, Sue, with your 45-year-old ass. I know that's right. Next up is the reward challenge, where we see Sam, Kyle, and Rachel take home the win. During their reward feast, we get yet another segment of Sam just not knowing what the hell fruits or vegetables were. This time, this man is literally perplexed by a damn kiwi, y'all. I believe this is the third time we're getting the same segment about Sam this season, and the first time it was funny and cute, but now it's just starting to get a little bit repetitive, you know? But besides all of that, during this reward feast, there's also some talk about possibly targeting Gabe. Now, that's not too surprising to me since his name has been tossed up in the air for a couple weeks now, but Genevieve is also brought up as a backup option here though, and so at this point it's getting pretty clear who the two options are going to be for the week. Now, there are two other important segments that kind of stood out to me here too. One was this personal segment we had of Teeny, where they talk about struggling with their identity, which I love that we're starting to get more content from Teeny because they were starting to kind of disappear for a second there. It's nothing too wild, but I will just say, highlighting personal stories like this is usually a good sign for a winner. The other thing that I thought was pretty interesting was the segment of Sam, where we saw him trying to form this outcast type of alliance. He mentions wanting to group up and form something with people like Andy and Teeny and Gabe, and obviously that ends up going nowhere for this episode, which really makes me wonder why they decided to keep it in the show anyway. Like, this segment just seemed totally unnecessary to me. Like, they did not have to include this scene at all, and the episode would have played out just fine, but they chose to include it anyway. Stuff like that just kind of perplexes me, and it makes me want to look at Sam a little bit harder, even though he has kind of fallen off. I still don't necessarily see him winning, but that was something interesting that I noticed. And then we get to the bread and butter of this episode, which is the rice negotiation. Now, it looks like they've been doing reward challenges and merge feasts and otherwise feeding these people damn near every 2 days. So personally, I wasn't surprised at all that nobody was willing to give up their immunity for this damn rice. But when Kyle proposes that they give up that damn shot in the dark twist instead, baby, everybody was down for that one. I just thought this part was hilarious because it feels like most of the fandom has been completely over this whole shot in the dark thing for a few seasons now. With that, it's just too small of a chance that it could save you, and that's if you even use it at the right time. So personally, I wouldn't be upset if we literally never saw this gimmick played out ever again, but some of y'all thought that Sam should have stood his ground more here, and I kind of have to disagree with that. Because for one, it would just piss off your hungry friends. And for two, like I said, this gimmick is barely even effective anyway. Hell, even if it does work, he'll probably just get voted out right after anyway, just like Caleb was. Even though it sounds like fun and sexy on the surface, the truth is it rarely ever helps out a player in the long run, and I think most people recognize that. The challenge itself ends up being an endurance comp, which is pretty standard, you know, nothing we haven't seen before. And in the end, Kyle is able to pull out the win, securing himself his 4th individual immunity of the season. Now, that is very impressive. I'm not gonna lie, I want to give Kyle his ones, but at the same time, I feel like Kyle's days are definitely numbered now. Back at camp, the talk is mainly between Gabe or Genevieve, and it looks like more people want Gabe out now because he's just perceived to be the bigger threat out there. But I just don't know about all that. I mean, it feels like Genevieve has made more power moves this season, at least based on what we've seen. But perception is everything out there, and Gabe is perceived to be the bigger threat. Maybe because he's a stronger dude, I'm not sure. But not everybody's necessarily going down that line of thinking. It looks like there are people like Teeny and Rachel that are able to recognize the big threat that Genevieve is. This is where we get that really strong clip of Rachel saying, I don't want to be the captain of the ship. I want to be the ocean. And that was a strong one to me. I felt that one in my heart. I'm not gonna lie, y'all. Sometimes all the layered metaphors that everybody is constantly spitting out on the show gets a little stale and tiring after a little while, but I really appreciated this for Rachel. The tribal council itself is pretty standard. I mean, those are getting kind of boring these days if you ask me. But in the end, we do see that Gabe is ultimately voted out here, almost unanimously too, which really surprised me. Just based on what we had been seeing so far in that episode, I was thinking that this may have been Genevieve's time to go. But at the same time, you know, Gabe was a bigger target for most people for a longer amount of time, so that totally makes sense too. I just don't know if it was the smart thing for the other two crew members to vote out Gabe here too, though. I mean, I get that he's a strong player and all that, but Tuku having 4 out of 8 members all from the same tribe going into next week would have been fantastic odds and given them numbers that you can't even deny. Overall, I'm still going to go ahead and say that Rachel is my top contender for the win. Really mainly still based on last week's episode. She was a lot quieter this week and she didn't necessarily get her way this episode, but I don't think that's necessarily too damning of evidence. I wish I knew more about her personality, you know, like more personal content about who she is as a character instead of just who she is as a player. But I also think it's a good thing that I know exactly where she stands in the game. So with all of that, plus the addition of that fantastic ocean quote, I'm going to keep her as my number 1. Teeny is also back on the board for me, mainly because we got to know her so personally in this episode, but also because we are also shown exactly who and where they are in the game, even when the vote isn't going their way. But I still want to be a little bit hesitant on Teeny just because it seems like they've been set up to be the narrator of this season instead of the winner. But don't get me wrong, I would not be surprised at all if Teeny ends up winning this whole thing. So that's where I'm at. And finally, just for funsies, I want to go ahead and put Sam's name back out there too, just to see if anything ends up happening. I just think overall he's had a full, complete story since episode 1, and we've always known exactly where Sam stood in the game. He also does get a lot of personal content with all that food stuff too, which helps. Now, Sam did kind of fall off for me towards the middle just because I was getting like hints and feelings that a lady would win this season. But I'll say if a guy does end up winning, I feel like it's most likely to be Sam. So that's all I have for today. Of course, I want to know, what did you think of this episode? And who could you see winning this whole thing? Let me know in the comments below. I feel like last season was so easy to read, but this one, even though we're so far into it, it still has me stuck. Honestly, at this point, it wouldn't even surprise me if my winner pick didn't end up winning at all. But hey, stuff like that still makes for a very fun watch. Of course, I'll be back here next week to recap the next episode with you all as we slowly but surely continue towards the finish line. But until then, bye.